Thank you, everybody. My name is Matt. I'm a saw doctor. So how did I get into this? So I've been woodworking most of my life. So in the 90s, when I was in high school and college, I started with guitar making. Really kind of fell into that. Then I graduated college in the late 90s. Actually, I was just telling David, with a degree in social work and being quite poor as a social worker, needed to furnish my apartment. And so I was like, well, I can build guitars. Why don't I give furniture a try? So after the first few tables fell apart, I figured it out and made my way into furniture and pretty early on discovered hand tools. So I've probably been using hand saws, planes for, over 20 years. First started sharpening saws in the early 2000s. So I bought my first house when I was like about maybe 25 in Cumberland. And it was, a 100-year-old colonial, and I had to kind of, build some furniture for it and then learn how to do a bunch of home repairs. And I was like, well, I need a saw. So there was this thing I discovered in the early 2000s called eBay. And that was pretty much my source. Found an old article about saw sharpening somewhere. I don't really remember. I think it was an old tool catalog, an old hand tool catalog. And this was probably about 2003, 2004. And just kind of sat down with this one-page description and just gave it a go. Saw cut, and I was hooked. I remember cutting some dovetails with it, building some side tables. From there, kept building furniture. I don't have any formal training in woodworking. I never took a class. To this day, I've never taken a class. Never really had anybody show me how to do it, so I essentially screwed it up and then figured the right way to do it after a bunch of mistakes. Mm-hmm. Probably took me, 10 or 20 saws to kind of really make sense of the process. Went through some whole sort of, in the 2000s are kind of a blur. I was single for a while. I sold my house to my ex. Then it was a lot of bars and sort of, chasing women. And then came back to woodworking probably, like most guys, I settled down when I met my wife, right? And then I sort of had time and energy again to focus on constructive things. We bought a house together, and so probably late 2009, then I really kind of started getting serious about saws again. And really started spending a lot of time saw sharpening. Never been really a big person into the internet. I'm not like a digital person. I only just recently got a smartphone. I'm old-fashioned. That's why my favorite things are from the 19th century. But I started a blog in 2009, 2010 about saws. Started to get some readers. And this guy that made saws reached out to me one day and said, hey, I'm a saw maker. I really like your blog. I need somebody to take over my sharpening business. I want to focus on saw making. And I have a lot of saw sharpening business. Would it be okay if I sent you some work? And I said, sure. He kind of tested me out. And from there, I got into saw sharpening. That guy's name was Mark Carroll. He started a company called Bad Axe Tool Works. So for a few years, I did all of Mark's sharpening work. And then Mark's business kind of took off, and then he hired employees and took his sharpening stuff back. But by that point, my business had kind of exploded. So I was sharpening saws for folks all over the country, even further. Sometimes I had customers kind of very far away, mostly North America though. And from there, it just kind of blew up. Got some publishing stuff, some DVDs, some magazine articles, wrote a book, came out last year with Lost Art Press on saw sharpening. So for the last 15 years, saw sharpening has really kind of just been part of the way I make my living. I've always had a day job. I worked in public health administration. And at nights and weekends, I was in my shop sharpening, and that's how I kind of put food on the table. It was like, you know, being a social worker, I always needed 2 incomes. My wife was home with the kids, and so it was like this or like go work at Lowe's like on the weekends, you know? And so it's pretty cool. I get to do this. So this year I made a tough decision. My job has kind of expanded. So I'm no longer taking in saw work. So I've kind of closed my business and just really want to focus on encouraging other people to learn the skill of saw sharpening on their own. So take a class with me, buy the book, you know, learn, try to do it yourself. So I'm happy to talk about saw sharpening and saws in general with you guys today, but that's kind of how I got where I am. Before I jump in talking about saws, questions, thoughts, what do you guys want to learn about? What do you want to hear about? I like this to be more of a conversation. I don't like lecturing. What are you wondering about? Don't be shy. Go ahead.
I have never sharpened a saw.
Yeah.
And I've been doing woodworking now for 35 years.
Sure.
And my saws still work pretty good, but I often wonder if it's worthwhile. Like, I don't think I have any saws that literally are in such bad shape that they need like a real overhaul. But I'm curious about maybe doing touch-ups. Like if you have saws that are in essentially good shape, you screw around with those saws, are you going to screw them up more than you fix them? Or like, let's say a big, you know, somebody who hasn't done it.
Yeah.
But I read the book, I come listen, I go do it. Can you effectively do like touch-ups on a saw that's in pretty good shape and improve it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, you know, I'm kind of picky, right? I want perfection in a saw, but that does not need to be the standard, right? A poorly sharpened saw cuts better than a dull saw, right? So start with what you're comfortable with. You know, a light joining and just a couple of strokes on each tooth. Don't worry about, you know, overall geometry. Just make those teeth as they are sharp. Try it out. I tell people sharp is as sharp does. So don't let anything else be an indicator of your success other than how the saw cuts. So do what you want to do, right? Do a little touch up, try it out. Does it cut better now? Then that's successful, right? You don't be too critical, picky, right? I have these like, there's too many. How many retired machinists? Come on, I'm going to find you anyway. All right. Too many of these guys in woodworking have made us think in like 10,000ths, 100,000ths of an inch things. No, that's not woodworking, right? Like, close enough is good. No, you don't want to. All right. But yeah, you know, just like start simple. Does that make sense?
It does.
Good.
How do you determine how much set you want to put on the saw? Like, let's say at the tapered saw, you're going to put less set up. Is there a formula for determining how much set you're going to put to the saw?
I like to say about 10% of the thickness of the blade. So if you want to use calipers, but honestly, most saws are somewhere between 20 and now I'm going to start talking in thousandths. And then, you know, most saws, like if it's a back saw, maybe 20, 30 thousandths of an inch thick. So the set should be each side about 10% of that. So we're talking 2-3 thousandths of an inch. That's the thickness of a piece of paper. The key is it's a lot less than people think it is, right? You can barely see it. I'm going to pass something around to show you what I'm talking about. These are teeth, properly sharpened to their size. Now these are teeth you'd see on a hand saw, not a back saw. Something like this, like a prototypical carpenter saw, right? Something for dimensioning lumber. These teeth are set appropriately. We're going to pass that around. Tell me if you can see how much set's on those teeth. It's very, very little, right? That's how much you want.
Matt,
Yeah.
for everybody, can you define set?
Yeah, so let's talk some basic geometry. All right, so saw teeth. Okay, there you go. So you got 4 basic parts of a sawtooth. This is like what we would call a rip tooth, the rip profile, that's crosscut. All right, so these little triangles, right? Everybody recognize that as a sawtooth, right? So you got the tooth itself. You got the point here. Okay, that's the sharp part that makes the work, right? This is the face of the tooth. The face literally faces the work, so it tells you the direction of the cut. Okay? So in this case, if this were a rip saw, this is an enlargement of the teeth. So you see the shorter face is the direction of the cut, okay? This is conversely the back of the tooth, right? Okay? This is not rocket science, right? Pretty simple. So you got point, face, back, okay? Then this space in here is the gullet, all right? People also generally refer to the point right there, where the face of one tooth and the back of another meet, that's also called the gullet. Generally, the gullet is where the wood chips collect, all right? So you push this into wood, the point cuts a chip out, rides up the face, it breaks in the gullet, those gullets fill up with sawdust or swarf. You push the saw up the backside of the work, swarf falls out, you draw back, it starts over. All right? So the set is, see now this doesn't have set because it's a piece of wood, right? But if you look at this thing going around, you'll notice these teeth ever so slightly, they alternate to the left and to the right. Okay? So you need set on all saw teeth, really. Because if not, when you probably had a saw jam on you, right? Okay? Wood fibers spring back after they're cut. Okay? You stretch wood actually before you cut it. All right? And this is true of all saws and all woods. Okay? So you need a clearance, a small amount of clearance. Otherwise, those wood fibers, as you cut through them, before they cut, you pull them, they stretch like little feather boards, right? Like on a table saw. Feather board prevents kickback. You can't draw it backwards. Those fingers on that feather board, that's just like the fibers of wood. You push a saw through it, all right? So all those teeth need set to cut a kerf that's slightly wider than the blade. That lets you draw it back. So the set is what does that. It cuts a kerf that's slightly wider than the thickness of the blade. All right, so it doesn't jam. And you don't want any more set than you need, because more set means you're taking away more wood, it's more work, right? That's bad. You don't want to do more work than you have to, right? Does that make sense? All right. So set, very little, about 10%. And that's a rough estimate.
So it's just a little offset.
That's it. And it's just, you do that with it. You can do it lots of different ways. Traditionally, old school, they do it with a hammer, literally just bend the tooth over. But a lot of people nowadays use a device like this. Okay, it's a setting device. And you just set it over the teeth. All right. It's got a little hammer plungy thing. Squeeze that, comes out, bends the tooth over. You do every other tooth. You turn it around, and you do the ones you skip the other way. So you get this pattern of alternating teeth. Make sense? Mm-hmm. Good question. Set's really frustrating for folks because most people think they need a lot more, right, than they do. It's very simple. And anybody here go on the internet and read about woodworking? All right, knock that off.
No.
Yeah, it's a bad idea. There's nothing good on the internet, all right, nothing. It's just so confusing because you read it like one person does it one way, another person does it another way. This person's like, oh, you only hammer set. This person's like, no, you got to use, pixie dust. It just gets overcomplicated.
Do you adjust the set after you sharpen, or do you not have to every time you sharpen? Does it matter?
So, me personally, first I joint the teeth, then I shape them, all right? Then I set them, then I joint again, and then I sharpen them. So I like to set the teeth before I sharpen them with the working point. You do not have to. People know who Ron Hawk is?
Yes.
Plain iron guy? Okay, his book on sharpening, great book. He's got a chapter on saws. Ron is a great guy, very smart. He did a really smart thing in his chapter on saw sharpening. He went to the two biggest saw experts and each had them describe the way they do it. So at the time, it was Pete Tarrin and Mike Wenzloff. And they each talked about how they set the teeth first or sharpen them first. And they both did it different ways. So there's no right way. And I love that he did that because it was just sort of proof that you had two people who were supposed experts, right? And they each do it differently. So it's like the tails first pins first thing, right? What's the right way to do it?
Just as long as you got
Whatever
the
works
right
for
result.
you. Yeah, it's the result that matters, not the right. So, does that make sense, Jack? How do you do
I haven't tried it yet.
it? You want to try though, don't you?
I don't have any hand saws right now that I need to sharpen, but we'll be getting some soon, so I'm kind of wondering what I'm getting myself into. Is there any like starter tools you recommend for someone that's any like basics that this is all you need to get started?
Go right to badass and get the best, right?
I mean, get out your credit card.
Yeah.
You're gonna need a couple of files. You know, you can still buy files at hardware stores, home centers. You know, if you're, start with what's available to you. You can start with a $5 miter box saw and a 6-inch, slim taper file from the hardware store. You don't need to spend a lot of money. When I first started, I literally probably spent $10. The trickiest thing is a vise. You can spend money on a vise, or you can just build a little hinged, couple of planks with some jaws on it, and that's your saw vise. And this works in any. Yeah, that's gonna take too long to crank up. I'm lazy in my old age.
Crank that.
Yeah, no, wood screw, right? So this just works in any face vise. Very simple, and this will clamp as well as any top of the line vise. So a good basic vise, some files. You are going to need a set. You can hunt around for antiques. Currently, there's not really any there's not really any new sets that you can buy. Bad Axe does sell this hammering thing. I don't know. I don't care for those. A noted tool maker is about to come out with a good saw set. So that's good news. But otherwise, I typically tell people you got to hunt around for an antique saw set. That's kind of the one drawback. And the one thing that is not, you can't go to Home Depot and buy a saw set. And a mill file. Does that answer your question?
So the antique saw sets I've got could be worth a lot of money.
Sure, yeah, they can get some.
I know when I first got them, I didn't even know what they were. I was like, what the hell is this thing?
Yeah, they could be worth some money. The fancy ones everybody wants, they can go for like $100.
So I see what you're grabbing there. It's reminding me of the sharpest saw I've ever used, which is a pruning saw for a tree.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know, I'd like you to talk about the angle of those teeth and how you go at those.
Is this what you saw me grabbing at?
Yeah.
All right. So tooth geometry, right? So we know the parts of a tooth, right? So tooth geometry. You can see the difference between these two teeth, right? Visually, you don't have to describe it, right? So these are rib teeth. These are cross-cutting teeth. So what makes them so? So there's a couple of things. See how this tooth has a face that's fully vertical like that, right? And this teeth kind of sit back, right? They lean back. So that's called rake. All right? So rake, it eases the action of the tooth, okay? So you see rake on cross-cut teeth. You see it on rib teeth too, but more so on cross-cut teeth. So these cross-cut teeth have these sharp points, right? Whereas these teeth here, see how they're flat on top? This is for ripping, this is for cross-cutting. So here's how saws cut. All right, so this is a piece of Douglas fir, right? So you can see the grain, right, or the fibers of the wood, right? So a rip tooth is like they say, and it's a good metaphor, like a chisel, because that straight edge chops across the long grain fibers, okay? So as you're pushing the saw into the work, it's just like a big scoop. It chops those fibers and scoops them out. Crosscut teeth work differently. They're cutting across the grain. So they can't just chop across anything because the strength of the wood goes this way. They need to cut either side of the kerf, like a set of knives. So you see those alternating bevels? So that's how crosscut teeth work. The points on this side score the kerf on that side. Teeth here score the other side. And together, they call it trough, right? Cleanly. So you combine the rake of the tooth, the amount it leans back, with the bevel of the tooth, right? And that's how you can create different geometries for cutting different things, right? Now these are two very basic patterns that we would call Western style teeth. They cut on the push stroke, and they have a combination function. All right, they both cut the chip and remove the chip. This saw, that old saw that John Wright had, big timber saws, they have different teeth that score fibers, they have raker teeth that clear the waste, so you can get real fancy on the big scale saws. But for our purpose, for saws like this that we use in woodworking, they have one kind of tooth that either does ripping or cross-cutting, does everything together. All right?
So how about a combination? So is that a compromise that is undesirable? Or?
Sure, yeah. So for a number of years, I played around with. So when I first started, well, probably early 2010s, for a few years, I really got into saw making. So I started making this saw and selling it to customers. I made a DVD about how to make it. And at that time, probably 2010 to probably about 2013, 14, I was really into that kind of tooth. So it's like a combination. We used to call it a sash saw filing. It's essentially a tooth that has features of both a rip and a crosscut tooth. So it leans back a little bit to ease up the cutting action, and it also has a small amount of bevel on the point to do some cross-cutting. So it's a compromise for a back saw that can rip and cross-cut. Now, for a hand saw, for like dimensioning, doesn't tend to work all that well. Works well on small scale saws like this. Yeah, so you'd call that kind of a combination tooth. That make sense?
Yeah. No, because you see a lot of saws you buy like in the hardware store for $15.
Yeah.
Are all combination blades. And,
Yeah, for power saws, right? Circular blades,
Yeah,
right?
blades. And so, interesting.
Yeah, they cut, the principles are all the same. So whether you're talking about a band saw or a circular saw blade or a hand saw, a Japanese saw or a Western saw, the basic, the functions of the tooth and the elements of the teeth are all the same. They're different versions, different degrees of rake, tooth bevel, and set, and gullet depth. And you can make anything, any kind of saw. So like this is kind of, I still love to make saws. I like to bring this to show people kind of what I'm into now. This is a saw of my own design. This is a saw for making lumber. So I use this to rip, timber framing a gazebo, so I'm using this to rip roof rafters from, trees that I've felled. So this is inspired by Japanese saws. So this saw cuts on the pull stroke. It has a deep gullet, but it's a Western style tooth. So this is the kind of stuff I'm kind of into now. Using combinations of teeth and creating kind of new saw forms that you don't typically otherwise see.
What's a little curly thing on the top?
What's that?
A little curly thing on the top.
It's decorative.
Yeah. I was gonna say it was a flip log.
Yeah, it's got to have a function, right? Yeah.
Matt, what kind of steel was that?
This is a blade from an old distant timber saw that probably came from my wife's family farm in Maine. It's lived a good 100 years bucking firewood they had a dairy farm up there. So I gave it a new life. I cut these with a grinder.
That's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, and then I had to file them all, and so I'm playing around with these kind of designs a lot now. But this is what I.
I've never seen anything like
It looks
it.
medieval.
Yeah, it does.
I'm telling you, this saw is
Put
like.
that on the internet and it's gonna fly.
Yeah.
Well, I just like using it. I still have fun kind of coming up with crazy designs.
We have a question over here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Speaking of decorative,
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of explanations, none of them I'm really fond of.
All right, let's get
For
it out of
that
the way.
little circular nib on the end of a saw.
Okay.
What's your input on what that is for?
It's
Is
for
it
aggravating.
extremely
That's what
decorative?
it's for. Yeah, it's
Okay. Because you get that little, a lot of the distance.
Yeah, the nib, right?
Tiny little half round nib on them.
Yeah, this thing here. What do you think it's for?
They do it to drive you crazy.
It always looked like the decorative to me, but I was like,
Yeah. Yeah, a little decoration, you know?
Do you have a technique to straighten out a saw blade that has a bend in it?
Sure, yeah, just hammering. You know, it's one of those things that on the internet you're gonna read all sorts of things, right? You gotta do like a ritual and like burn candles in a particular pattern.
Are you hammering the concave side?
So hammer the humps, okay? Hammer the humps. That's how I always remember it. So if you've got a saw that's bent like this, okay, you're gonna place it on a flat surface. And I use a particular kind of hammer that I've machined that just has just the right amount of dome on the face, but you don't have to get too picky. Make sure it's nice and polished so you don't mark up the blade. And then you're just gonna hammer it. Be gentle. It's a piece of steel. You know, how do you straighten a piece of bent metal? You know, you hammer it down. People get a little kooky about it. As long as you're gentle, you're not gonna hurt it. And there's nothing magical about it. You're really just like, it's not a whole lot different than taking a dent out of a fender to me. It's just a thinner piece of steel and use lighter taps. If you're interested in learning it, try it out. You don't even really need an anvil. A good hard bench top will work. It's actually got a good amount of give on it, which is what you want. And like, you know, old saws are a dime a dozen. Buy a bunch of old saws that are beat up, and I guarantee in a couple hours you'll have mastered it.
Because like I've grown in my career, I've had to flatten out like 1/8 material that came back from heat treat.
Yeah.
That was concave.
Sure.
And instead of grinding all that to get it flat, old timer that I work with said, no, you hammer it down.
There you
But
go.
you're hammering the concave side to actually stretch the metal back down. But
So-
that's on like 1/8 thick material. So-
Yeah, I mean, so the thinner the metal, the more difficult it is to hammer it straight, right?
Right, the less material.
Yeah, there's less material to move, right? So there are situations where I would hammer a concave side, right? If it's got like a compound bend. But generally tell people start out with something, you know, again, steel, because it's so hard, right? It acts a little differently, but yeah, just go easy. Start with simple bends, like if it's like a freaking potato chip, you know, don't start with that. You know, start with something simple. It's not rocket science. I mean, I figured this stuff out in my basement, you know. I try to demystify things for people because we get a little freaked out, like I'm going to ruin it. You know, it's, you know, you're not going to ruin it. It's already ruined, you know.
Is that the same when you find like a really good back saw with a spine on it? You do that differently. I thought when I'm trying to stretch out the blade and the spine.
Yes, back saws are different. So the way back saws work is it's not necessarily the stiffness in the blade that keeps it straight. It's the back, right? So a proper back saw, the theory goes, is that it should be ideally sprung onto the back. And so theoretically, you have this with even amount of grip, right? If you drive the nose and the tail of it down a little further, the back springs up and pulls the tooth line straight. And the opposite of that is actually what you want to focus more on. If you drive the, did I say it backwards? I can never describe it the right way. So if you drive the toe down too far or the back of the back down too far, you will push the tooth line into an S, right? Because it's the opposite. So you actually want the back pulling up on the tooth line so it stretches it straight. So the process of taking the back off and putting it back on can take a few tries because you got to get it just right. And once you pass that point where it's exerting that, right, where it's too far down either on the toe or the back, it'll take what's straight and it'll sort of crumple it, right? So you want it just right so it pulls it straight.
So if you're doing that, do you immobilize the blade in like a vise or something like that, and then pull a little bit, if you want to pull it out, pull a little bit?
To remove the back?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what I do is I have a machinist vise with leather jaws on it. So let's say I have the vise right here, right? So I open up the jaws, slide the back in, clamp the jaws down like this real hard, right? And they're leather, so it's not going to hurt the blade. And I take a block of wood, so the saw is immobilized, and it's clamped hard on the blade. And with a sledgehammer, I just take the wood, resting on that edge, and I just drive it off. Yep. And then I'll flip it over, do the same thing, drive off the toe, and then once you get it off a little, you can work it off. I've seen people use same kind of thing with a machinist vise, but they'll clamp it in the vise and have long jaws, and then they use a kind of lever to make it a little more controlled and kind of lever it off, which is fine. They're on there pretty good. Steel backs in particular, old steel backs, they can be quite tenacious. Brass is a weaker material, doesn't have as much grip, much easier to take off. But steel backs, American saws.
You have to like, heat it up just a little.
I've never had to heat one up. You could do that, but I've never had to do that, and I've always never been stymied by getting the back off. It can take a little doing, and it makes the blade go like all wonky. You freak out. You go, oh my God! It's fine. It doesn't back. Yes.
If you would, talk a little bit about numbers of teeth and points.
Okay. So we measure the size of teeth by what's called tooth spacing. So for saws that you typically use in furniture making, so like this is a pretty fine tooth saw. This is I think 14 points. All right. So that means in the space of 1 inch, that's how many points of teeth there are. So you count the first point lined up with 0, let's say, on a rule, and then you count the points down to and including the last point that lines up with a 1 inch mark. So that's 14 points. And then hand saws can go as fine as 3-4 points. So back saws you'll see typically in the 10 to 15 point range. Fine dovetail saws can go even finer. And then back saws, or rather hand saws, so this is 10 points, it's like a fine crosscut. Rip saws, you'd see 4, 5, 6 points. And then, always important to note, points per inch is different than teeth per inch. Teeth per inch means you're not counting the points in the space of 1 inch, you're counting whole teeth. So you're literally counting, so let's say this is 1 inch, okay? So inch starts here, ends here. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, that's 5 points. Now, if you're measuring teeth per inch, you're counting whole teeth. Starting here to here, you've got 1 tooth, 2 teeth, 3 teeth, 4 teeth. So teeth per inch is always 1 less than points per inch. All right, so the formula, PPI minus 1 equals TPI for the mathematician.
A naive question, just to follow up.
No.
It's a naive question, but I'm not sure I know the answer.
That's all right. I might not know the answer either.
So why is there this variety in the number of points of those envelopes?
Oh,
There's such a wide variety.
That's a great
How
question.
do they cut the...
Well, what's your guess?
Speed and, versus fineness.
Okay, speed, fineness, coarseness, okay.
Same as sandpaper.
Same as sandpaper. Ooh, is that you?
Yeah.
That's a good analogy, yeah. Yeah, so bigger teeth, they take bigger bites, less accuracy, faster work.
Faster work.
Right, yeah, so same thing, yep. So little dovetail saws, 15, 16, 17 points, they cut very slowly, but they leave a relatively much finer surface, more accurate, right? The scoring cutting marks from a saw like this, you wouldn't want to, glue any dovetails together, right? They're very, very coarse, yeah. So yeah, you got it. And the sandpaper thing, yeah, same kind of deal.
All right, so the saw I've sharpened is the oscillating buzz saw that you hit the nail and you got to sharpen it or buy a new one. The bzzz things that.
Oh, like those, the ones with the blades are like $30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just hit it with a triangle, put it in the vise, and that's how I do it. I have no idea what file to use. So can you talk about that a little? You said you do a jointer.
Okay.
What do you do, the back and then the face or something? Can you talk about files?
So you're talking about sharpening those actual oscillating tool blades?
No, I'm just sort of
You want to know in general?
humbly admitting that that's my only experience.
Okay. All right,
Can you talk about how
Okay.
to use a saw?
All right, so let's talk a little bit about sharpening. Okay, so basic process. You got dull saw teeth, right? So clamp your teeth in a vise. There are 3 basic steps. Joining, all right, sharpening, setting. But we use them in different combination, okay? So like the full process, I said before, is first you joint the teeth. So what's joining the teeth? Same as joining a board, okay? So typically you'd use a mill file. Let's say an imaginary mill file. Well, you all know what a mill file looks like, right?
That's right.
Okay, so a mill file is just like,
It's a flat file.
it's a straight flat. It's gonna bother me now. I'm gonna blame my children or my wife.
It's just a flat, fine metalworking file. That's it.
When you go to the store and you're like, hey, give me a file. Well, somebody stole my mill file. Damn it.
Yeah.
All right.
Flat file or a half round file or a round file.
Yeah, so a mill file is just literally just your kind of prototypical file, okay? It's got a tang on the end, tapers a little bit, all right? That's what you would use to joint the teeth, okay? So we're gonna say this is our mill file. Joining the teeth is just like joining a board, okay? Run it down the face of the teeth. Okay, it does 2 things. 1, levels the teeth. So a lot of people when they would sharpen a saw, if they were not attending to joining or leveling the teeth, they just go right to filing the teeth, sharpening them. The problem with that is you're changing the heights of the teeth. You have nothing to guide your process. So joining is a really, really critical step. It levels all the teeth, and what it does is it creates a small facet, right? That amount of material you've shaved off the points of the teeth, a little flat, that you can now see to guide your sharpening process. When you see a flat on every tooth after the joining, it tells you you've touched every tooth and you can now watch your progress. To sharpen teeth, you use saw file. So I do that. Okay? So saw files, here, I'll pass these around. This is a smaller one. All right. Oh, you want to start? You want to go both? Oh, that's fine. I got plenty.
Triangular file.
So they are triangular in cross section, but they are not triangle files. All right. These are tapered saw files. They're made expressly for sharpening saw teeth. Triangle file is a machinist tool. It's a different tool. It's cut different, has a different purpose. Edges are too acute to file saw teeth. So yes, these are triangular, but they actually have 6 cutting edges. That fine edge where the faces meet actually has separate teeth cut on it to make sure the gullets are rounded. A machinist triangle file or a needle file is too acute, all right? You want your gullet to have a little bit of rounding. We're talking small scale, but it's important.
So how can you tell if you've got, like, I've got files that I've been cleaning out my dad's storage space and his workshop, so, okay, it's, how can you tell the difference between a saw file and a triangular file just by looking at it?
Yeah, you can.
You can't.
I can. You're screwed.
I have no idea.
That's okay.
I think some of the saw sets, some of the saw sets that I've got actually came from my grandfather's shop.
So
and toolboxes.
The giveaway is they taper, okay, in their length, or rather in their width across their length. So triangle files will come to a point typically, and they're much finer. These taper, and they have a blunt, square point. And if you look at them, you can see the distinct edges cut in the arises. All right, so in the cross section of the file, what I'm talking about is here's your file, right? You can see separate distinct teeth cut along this edge, and then they taper. And then if you buy them new, which is what you should do because you never use used files, throw them away or recycle them. Start with a fresh file. They are like sandpaper. You're supposed to use it up. When it's no longer useful, you put it in a drawer telling yourself it still has a use, but you will never get to it, right? Come on, sandpaper jokes? Come on. Nobody has the sandpaper drawer? Come on, right? Of course, all right? You just can't throw it away. It's like a woodworker thing. I don't know, we're all cheap. So yeah, you always start with new files. They're cheap. You can get files from $5 to $10. They're going to cut a lot better than Grandpa's old file. It's probably
Sandpaper doesn't get old and worn out. It just becomes finer.
yeah, that's what you tell yourself. I tell myself the same lies. But yeah, so start with a new file. I mean, all right, good question though. Where was I? Okay, joining. So you've now got level teeth all the same height, okay? And you've got this little flat, right, on the point of every tooth. Now, okay, you're taking your file, and you are at the heel of every saw, right? They got this to the back of one tooth. That's called the heel bevel, right here, right? You don't file there. You file here in the first gullet. So the sharpening process is very simple. It's the methodical removal of that flat. So you file, you look, you file, you look. And what you start to notice is that first flat on that tooth, it starts to shrink as you're removing material away. The moment, as you file, that flat disappears, guess what happens?
It's a sharp point.
Tooth is sharp. Now, what happens if you keep filing past that point? That flat disappeared.
You get a deeper go.
Still sharp though, right?
Yeah.
So sharp, it's shorter.
Yeah.
So
That's
you're-
right. And a short tooth, like 3 people carrying a log on their shoulder, the short guy in the middle, is he doing any work?
No.
No. Okay. So you stop. The moment that flat disappears, that tooth is now sharp and it reaches the bottom of the kerf the same as all the other teeth. That's sharpening. That's the key to it. Use that flat as a visual cue to guide your process to know when to stop filing. Anybody can make a tooth sharp. What makes a good cutting saw is making sure the teeth are sharp and all exactly the same height.
Use a magic marker though, so like
I don't,
to help you see it.
but lots of people like to do that, so they'll use like Dicam,
Yeah.
which is a machinist layout fluid. I keep it for students. They a lot find it very helpful. All right, so I have red. You can get it in all sorts of different colors. You paint it on the teeth. Some people do it before they joint. Some people do it after. It just helps to illuminate, I should say, sort of make some different contrast for the sharpening process. So that mechanical, methodical removal of the flats, that's sharpening. And then, when that tooth is sharp, you move to the next one. Now, there is some nuance because with a file that has cutting faces on both sides, you are removing material from the face of this tooth, but also the back of the neighboring tooth. So you need to learn how to accentuate your file stroke to the flat on the heel side of your saw, right, like this, so that you leave some flat to work with when you go to the next gullet. Okay? If you don't do that, the problem becomes that you've now sharpened this tooth. And let's say you sharpen this tooth too, because you're removing material from both sides, right? Hey, I can sharpen 2 teeth at the same time like this, right? So you've got no flat here, which means you don't want to file it, right? But now you've left this gullet shorter, okay? The gullets collect the work. They determine how much work the tooth can do. You want your gullets to be all the same depth, all right? So you remove this flat, about half of this one, so you can move to the next gullet, file it down. So you're sort of accentuating your file stroke this way. So you're removing material, oh, it's sharp. Next gullet, sharp, next gullet, sharp, and you work your way all the way down. That's the basic process. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Is that on one side of the blade and then you switch to the other side?
Oh, okay, it's David, you're getting tricky. So, it is David, right?
Yep.
I'm amazed. Usually I'd be calling people all sorts of names. I must be on my A game tonight. All right. So what I just described is the process for sharpening a rip tooth. So the thing with rip teeth is they all have the same shape. One tooth to the next. They're identical. So they have a square back and a square face, right? See how these teeth do not? So these teeth, all right? This tooth has a bevel that faces that way. This one this way, right? So you cannot file them all the same direction. So what David is talking about is filing one set of bevels. So the way you make a crosscut bevel is you file at an angle, okay? You file a rip tooth, you're straight across the blade, okay? Perpendicular, right? Straight across. Crosscut tooth, okay? You don't file straight across, you file at an angle, okay? That's how you create those alternating bevels. So that means you have to alternate your file. So this set, you file this direction. Next set, you would have to turn, okay? So it is cumbersome to go back and forth like that and to build muscle memory. I tell students, file all sets of bevels in one direction first, skipping every other gullet, and then go back and file in the other direction.
Almost like a chainsaw.
Yeah, exactly, just like a chainsaw, that's right. And again, chainsaws, same principles, right? You've got bevel, you've got gullets, same thing. So if you can file a chainsaw, this isn't all that much different, okay?
But you still joint it the same, the crosscut?
Yeah, the joining is the same, yep. So I know what David was referring to is flipping the saw around. So the more traditional way is you file one set of bevels in one direction, then you turn the saw around and you file the other set. Now I don't do that, or I should say, I don't typically do that. I file my saws generally all from the same side. Flipping it around or not makes no difference. What I have found though is with students, the key to learning how to sharpen saws quickly and easily is developing muscle memory as quick as possible. So the trick is, if you turn that saw around, all of the muscle memory you've created and accentuating your file stroke always to the heel side, in combination with the rake angle, is now completely opposite. So it's a lot trickier for people to learn that way, I've found. But there is no right or wrong. So just remember, if you flip the saw around, if you want to do it that more traditional way, you have to reorient your file, okay? Not just for the bevel angle, all right, but for the rake angle. So what do I mean by the rake angle? So when you're filing teeth like this, all right, the rotation of the file this way, that determines the rake, all right? It's easier to see on a rip tooth. So you can see, when you file a tooth, you want the file seated fully in the gullet, all right? If I rotate the file this way, what happens to the face that I'm cutting? The tooth starts to lean backwards, right? That's a totally different cutting action, right? Makes a different tooth, okay? So you sort of lock your wrist to keep that face orientation correct. You turn this around now, what just happened? It's 180 degrees reversed. You now need to change it, okay? So that's the trick. People forget to do that when they flip the saw around, and that's why I find many saws that have sets of teeth with two face angles and two back angles. It means the person flipped the saw around, but they didn't change their file orientation. And you can file whole new teeth.
Right.
Okay? So it gets tricky. Mm-hmm. By the way, I described this all in my book, which I encourage you all to get for free on some pirated website. I don't know what those things are called, but I'm told they're out there.
Oh,
Yes.
Lost Art Press, good company.
Yeah, they're great.
Are you always rigorous about basically filing with the file held completely horizontally?
Oh, good question. Bob? Paul, good question, Paul. Paul, where do I know you from?
I took one of your courses.
Oh, that's-
I wrote Bob that night.
That's it.
And then I gave you some best mailer saws that I brought them up from sharpening the list.
Oh, okay, yes,
I
yes.
keep that in your house with you.
Right, right, okay, good to see you again. Totally forgot your question.
The question was, how
Oh, yes.
do you orient the file?
Great question. Okay, so what Paul is referring to, we generally call slope. So I've been talking about filing, straight across like this or at an angle for bevel teeth. And then I've also talked about the orientation this way. All right, so we call these are three orientations. So you've got the rake orientation, which is the rotation this way, right? Makes the tooth lean back. All right. You've got the bevel orientation, which means you either file straight across or at an angle to create a bevel. And then you've got the slope orientation. Okay. So everything I've been talking about, and for most purposes, you would always do this, is to keep the file perpendicular to the side of the blade. All right. Paul's talking about sort of dropping the handle like this. All right. Which you can do. It's just a different way to create bevel on a tooth. Okay. You can get all sorts of fancy with the ways you create bevel. What that allows you to do is to file a face bevel while controlling for a back bevel. It allows you to create a face, a cross-cutting tooth with a square back, which means the included point, the included angle at the point of the tooth is a little more robust, stays sharper a little longer. Okay. It's just kind of another way to file a cross-cut tooth. All right. And you can combine slope with bevel. All right. Again, you can do all sorts of fancy stuff. I don't file a lot of saws with slope. I never found much utility for it. Some people love it. Some people are like, that's the only way I would ever file a saw is with slope.
So when you're doing your muscle memory, you have this saw and vise.
Yeah.
The vise is, here's looks like it's maybe about 12 inches or 15 inches long. Do you do the muscle memory, you move your body with the teeth? Or
Yeah. Yeah, yep.
so you're constantly doing the same motion?
Yeah. So my process when I'm at my vise, I kind of tend to work in 2-inch sections. So I file standing up. My jaws are about yay high. You want to make yourself, ergonomics are really important with saw filing. You want to make yourself as comfortable as possible. Because filing saw teeth is complete misery. Mm-hmm. So give yourself, do yourself a favor. Get as comfortable as possible. Getting drunk first helps too. I'll work on a few teeth, right? A couple inches. I'll move along. I'm always sighting, as I go. It's sort of a moving process.
Do you use magnification for that?
No.
No?
I guess I'm still relatively young. I have not needed it yet. Although technically I'm blind as a frickin' bat. I have like a 7 correction on my contact lenses. At some point, I imagine I will need some kind of magnification aid, but I have not yet. Yes.
A question on the jointing.
A lot of students find that that magnification very, very helpful and critical. And actually, I would say, it makes me sad to say this, the one make or break for people being able to learn how to do this themselves is if they can see. And if you cannot see and you are starting, your close-up vision is starting to go, it becomes very, very difficult. That's the one sort of thing that I can't help somebody overcome. I can't help you learn what to look for. It's very, very challenging. It kind of sucks, but.
Lots of bright light.
Yeah, bright light, use magnification aids, use those contrast aids like the Dichems and that kind of stuff. But that's rare that I have somebody that just can't see it. And even for those folks, they can get close enough. And like I said, a poorly sharpened saw cuts better than a dull one. So.
Kind of a silly joining question. So flat file is about EA.
Yeah, they come in.
And saw blade is about EA.
Yep.
Whatever, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so how critical it is as you're filing a joint that you keep it uniformly level across the whole blade?
So good question. Yeah, it's not so. you want to always sight your joining, right? So the biggest mill file I use is a 12-inch mill file. But the longest saws I sharpen, I mean, I can sharpen saws. I have saws that are 5 feet long, right? Timber saws. So it's a process of joining and looking. And then you learn how to kind of sight the tooth line, right? And you can see low spots, high spots, and you shape it, right? So it's sort of like joining the edge of a board with a jack plane. Ideally, you'd want the longest plane possible, but as you said, we don't have mill files that are this long. So you just learn how to accentuate your stroke and then work in localized areas to bring the high spots down with the level, make sure it's got the right overall shape, and then it's the sighting that you really learn how to see. You can use a straight edge, but long saws all have a crown, so a straight edge isn't going to help you there. So you just kind of learn how to sight to make sure you pick out the high spots, you work those down, blend it all together. Other questions?
I mean, really, the saw could almost have a crazy radius to it, right? As long as in that local
Like an arc.
area, right?
Yeah, rocker.
As long as that, yeah, it could have like a rocket in it, but as long as in that local area, you're joining to get consistency of the tooth height in that area.
Yep.
Not necessarily in a straight line.
Uh,
Right? You could have an arc and still.
Oh,
Still
yes.
work,
Yep, that's
right?
that's correct. Yep, you could. Yep, yep. Yeah, so the key is all the teeth on right in front and behind one area are all the same height. Yes. So ideally, you want a straight tooth line or a gentle crown.
Right.
But technically speaking, sort of a concave tooth line would still cut well, as you see in pruning saws, right?
Yeah.
What questions haven't we answered? Asked.
Oh, jeez.
So many.
I think Chris wanted to ask how you sharpen a file.
I sharpen saws, not files.
A couple of questions is, how long does it take to typically to sharpen a saw, a typical hand saw like that? How long does something like that take? What kind of, I know that I've seen some places you can get, like saw blade, like circular saw, tail saw blades sharpened. I've never known how much they cost to get sharpened.
Yeah.
How much does it typically cost to have a saw like these sharpened? And is there, I don't even know what the cost of a typical saw blade is, because the hand saws that I've got are all ones that I got from, I've never bought one.
Yeah.
I don't even know how much they typically cost and if it's cost effective. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so that's a few questions in one. So, like cost, time. All right, so let's start with time. That's a tough question to answer because it totally depends. Me, so my work. So typically, I'm taking old beat up saws and rehabilitating them. So they need all new teeth filed, like reshaped, right? Set, sharpened properly. I can easily spend 2 hours just on the filing part. That's pretty typical for what customers would send me, right? Most people are sending me sort of, I don't want to say train wrecks, but hey, I found this old saw, I really love it, or this was my grandfather's saw.
Kind of nostalgic.
Yeah, but the thing is, so this is talk about cost. Nobody's ever going to make a saw this good again. So they are worth investing time and money into. If somebody were to start a business, so Bad Axe sells a saw that they are claiming is as good as, or is in the vein of a classic distance saw. They maybe get close. Maybe it's even the same. Those are, what do they go for? $400 or $500? I don't know. I would argue they still miss something. So to me, you can take, let's say we'll use that as our standard, maybe $400. The value of a well-tuned, precisely filed classic handsaw. I mean, you can get saws of that quality for $5 at any flea market. So you can take something worth $5 that I could sell all day long at $400 a pop, polished up, cleaned up. I mean, to me, that's really profound, and I think they're worth every penny. But the value thing, the cost, I mean, that, it's all relative, right? If you're a millionaire, what's a couple $100 on a nice tool? If you're, not, that's a personal choice. To me, I think they're worth every penny. But, what do you spend on a nice table saw? Right? A lot more than $400. So, it's just all perspective, all relative. For my work, typical saw somebody would sell me that needs the full rehab filing would be $150, $175, and could take, a couple hours of work easily. So.
I guess the last question I've got that for regards to sharpening is, after you've gone through after you've gone through sharpening all the teeth, do you always have to go through and reset?
So I always recommend people always set the teeth before sharpening. Set the teeth every time they sharpen, whether you do it before or after, it doesn't matter. Once you learn what the right amount of set is, it doesn't hurt to set the teeth because you get your setting device to a certain point where that's the right amount. You go through that process. If the teeth are already set the correct amount, you're not doing anything.
Right,
So
that's why I'm wondering how often would you need to do a setting of them as compared to just sharpening without?
Technically speaking, you can get away with a sharpening if the teeth have the correct amount of sets. I'll tell you what I do with my saws. I always set my teeth, but I could get away with one sharpening and not setting them. Right? My teeth are like really tuned with such a minimal amount of set. Any reduction of the depth of the tooth from joining is going to take that minimal amount of set out. So you maybe can get one, but it depends on how much set's in the tooth to begin with, So I tell people, just get in the habit of always setting your teeth. No shortcuts. Or there are shortcuts, but don't make that one.
You could measure it with calipers, right? Measure to the blade and then
retired machinist, right? What did I tell you?
prepare across the teeth.
Yeah. So that's what I keep these in here. For students, you want to get fancy, the retired machinist, come on. And then one guy was like, no, you got to get micrometers. And I was like, get that.
I think it's getting to be Matt's best bedtime here.
No,
he has to go all the way to Warwick, I think.
So do the set pliers come in different degrees of set?
Yeah, they're adjustable.
Typically marked on them somehow?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, there's a system, but
So
it's
how
really
do you know
weird.
which one to use? 1 through 6. How do you know?
It's just considered a relative scale. Yeah, sometimes 6 is going to be the most, sometimes it's going to be the least. You know how these corporations work, right? They all work to piss each other off. So one guy was like, we're going to make our scale go up and down. The other guy was like, we're going to make it go left and right. We're going to do 1 to 10, or he's going to do 10 to 1. You just got to figure it out. But it's all just a relative scale,
Very good.
Thank you.
All right.